this air or mist blowing out of the boom room. And I believe this is the boom room 2. And this thing just lines up with everything I'm trying to do on our homestead here, where I grow food using simple, sustainable systems that people can grow in any space. The goals being maximum amount of food with the least amount of work and resources after we get our systems established. This definitely checks the box. So I just want to walk you through my thoughts on the boom room 2 so far, how it's working, some things I had to figure out, and does it match my criteria of simple, sustainable systems? I have been growing mushrooms for a long time. I grow them in our forest, like on the edge of our forest. If you watch some of my other videos, I do inoculated logs. I actually have 15 new logs that just went out this week. And I also grow in wood chips in our gardens, or I'm working to do that with spent blocks that I've grown in other, like on a countertop. And I wanted to try the boom room 2 because when I was growing the bricks, they were drying out. I wasn't having a lot of luck staying on top of keeping them with the right moisture and all the things they needed to really thrive and produce for a decent amount of time. Mine would produce a little bit and then they would get dried out and then the whole brick would be kind of wasted. And that felt very wasteful because the bricks can be expensive. I think relative to what you get off of them, if you do it right, they're very affordable because mushrooms are extremely expensive. But we also want to make sure that they do work. It's the same as the towers, right? I can grow a pepper. I just harvested this red pepper. How cute is that? They're little when they first come in, but I've got 8 of these on one plant here in my garage. And like that's an enormous amount of savings. This cost me pennies. I've got my system set up. The peppers are going to grow. Some of my peppers are perennials in that I was able to overwinter them, grow them in here all winter, and now they're in season outside and then they'll come back in. So huge amount of food that can come off of a plant that's going to last a really long time if we have the right system to take care of it. And red peppers are very, very expensive in this area. And actually peppers have some of the worst pesticides on them for humans, highest loads and the worst ones for humans. So yeah, growing our own. Like this is what we're doing here. Just growing an enormous amount of food. If you're not familiar with my background, and I did write this in my free ebook that talks about how to vertical garden this way. I'll put a link to that below. I was a gardener for 20 years. Really felt called to take control of our food, not trusting the food systems that were out there. And this was years ago, and it's gotten far worse since then. And I went big, like I did a huge permaculture food forest, a back to eat and garden, so much work, so much investment in resources and time. And then we moved, sold that property. When we moved here, I started setting up no dig garden beds. And again, I have probably $2,000 or $3,000 if you go in my backyard worth of inputs I put in there, and there's nothing to show for it. They washed down the mountain. They just went back into the earth. So now I turned it back to grass because we're growing different ways. And also like in 2020 and 2021, there was a huge movement to homestead and grow your own food. And a lot of people rushed out to do that. And there's kind of a falling away now because it is a tremendous amount of work to grow food if you aren't using the right systems. So in 2020, 2021, I was shoveling compost. The compost that I had purchased from pretty much the only compost person around here. It was very expensive. I had truckloads of it that I was shoveling by myself into the gardens, and it was full of plastics. They were taking, I guess somebody was donating animal waste to the compost facility, and they were putting it in feed bags, and instead of dumping it out of the feed bags, they were grinding the feed bags into the compost. And that was just like a real eye opener for me. Like, what is in the compost? I was buying it from the stores after that and doing it one bag at a time. And here it is sitting, this hot, very hot compost is sitting in these cheap plastic bags that are leaching chemicals into it. There's pharmaceuticals from the animals. A couple of people that year on YouTube that are gardeners who had purchased organic, high quality, organic, expensive compost, and it was contaminated with forever chemicals, and their gardens were dying. So it just was like a real eye opener to me that, first off, I've shoveled 24 dump trucks worth of wood chips when I was doing a Back to Eden garden. 24. It's so many. That work is tremendous, and I can't get wood chips here easily like I could in our last place. I'm not opposed to wood chip gardening, but it's so much work. And then here, the areas I did do it, because of the climate here, it just reforested. It actually made the situation worse because the forest was like, yes, thank you. And everything came up through these wood chips, because that's what we're doing with wood chips. We're trying to mimic the forest, and everything grew up through it because the forest was really happy about this situation. All that to say, I had to find a better way. And so I went on a hunt. I was familiar with tower gardens. I had one in Florida. I was growing lettuce in it in the off season indoors. And the more I started thinking through like how these work and looking at all the other options out there, this is what solved the problem. I can grow year round. So I've got my aloe, which will not grow in our climate. This is edible aloe growing up here. Very expensive thing that I purchase to consume. So this saves a ton of money if I can grow our own. I put it in kids' smoothies. Awesome. I've got basil growing indoors. I'm actually going to make some pesto. I eat a plant-based diet. So this feeds my family with their sides and smoothies and all of those things. And it feeds me pretty much most of the food I consume comes from my gardens, which is amazing. In here is all my peppers. I have 12 different varieties of peppers and a couple of pairs of each one. I've got bell peppers, like sweet peppers. I've got snacking peppers, hot peppers, chili peppers, so many things. These are growing indoors because they just do amazing in here. And then outside, everything, like everything you would buy at the grocery store, plus so much more, is what's growing. I have tomatoes 2 weeks past our last frost date, which is unheard of. We wouldn't have tomatoes ripening in this climate until August, late July, August. I have eggplant already ready. Again, those wouldn't be ready until late July, August. I just planted more peppers. There's broccoli and cauliflower because we can blur the lines. We can blur the seasons when we grow this way. So I have bok choy cabbages and broccoli growing at the same time as watermelon and melons and cucumbers, tomatoes, and the zucchini squash. I've already been eating zucchini for a few weeks now, and there's so much to harvest on the zucchini. Again, these are crops that would not be ready in our area for another 6 weeks minimum for squash. The pests are easier. I've got beets, herbs, cabbages, kohlrabi. I have an entire tower of celery just for juicing because, you know, that's a thing and it's amazing. Growing all our tomatoes for the year that will be canned on the towers. I'm growing all our winter squash. I have towers in another area where I have trellises, and we're growing all our winter squash and all our melons, because melons and watermelons in the grocery store, there's some really bad things being put in them, injected in them and on them. All that to say, I did the hard thing. I did the big thing. Bigger is not better when it comes to gardening. I have found we live in a time where there are some cool systems we can use to really think outside of the box, grow outside of the box, and grow an enormous amount of food. Now, is it perfect? No. You know, a lot of people don't like that these are plastic. They are a plastic. It's a special material, and it's a blended UV material. So I have friends who've been growing in these for over 13 years in the hot Florida sun without any problems. So they don't break down, and that was really important to me. I was tired of investing huge amount of time, huge amounts of money, and huge amounts of work into things that were just falling apart. I built some raised beds when we moved here, and they just literally molded back into the earth, rotted back into the earth. So something that'll last. It was an investment, but I have it. I know 20 years from now, Lord willing, I'll be growing on these towers. Will I need to replace a pump occasionally? Probably, yes. But the system itself, the expensive parts, the container part of this is handled. And I don't have to worry about that ever again, which is very freeing. And if you follow my channel, I also cover permaculture. I had a permaculture food forest, and I love permaculture because the same thing when we're trying to do a no-dig garden bed is to create a forest floor so that the soil is alive and we have healthy soil. That's what Back to Eden is. But that requires constantly putting in new inputs because we're actually creating a forest where there is no protection, and you're trying to create a forest without the things that are most important in a forest, which is shade and microclimates and diversity, right? And so I did a huge food forest in our last property, and they're amazing. I love it, totally support it. You will get lots of abundance of a few things. I was never able to replace the grocery store with my extremely large food forest that had 24 dump trucks worth of wood chips. So that's where these come in. Like the towers can fill the gaps of that, but I do still have our food forest. I've just changed how I do it, and I'll share that in other videos. I now do perimeter food forests. So when I did our entire lawn as a food forest, it became a lot of work and a lot of maintenance because you're having to navigate, basically you're in the forest. And so you're having to make paths and maintain paths and deal with all of those things that come with a huge space that you're growing food. So on perimeter permaculture food forest, what I've discovered is I can take the edges of our property where things aren't great. We have this big clay wall that's gross and it's ugly, and it's reforesting itself because that's what nature is going to do. And instead of allowing it to reforest itself, I am putting in a food forest. So fruit trees with elderberry bushes and blueberry bushes, and then echinacea and medicinal herbs, and I'm just layering those things in there. So when you look at it from a distance, it looks like it's just now, again, part of the forest edge, but upon closer inspection, it's loaded with food. I've done that in an area by our basement where it's mulberries. I've done it as our landscaping, so I foodscape. All of our landscaping is basically in a perimeter food forest with so much food. But again, those foods are seasonal and they're abundant in what they are, but they don't replace the day-to-day things we need to just go make a meal. I'm gonna make some pizzas today. Let me show you what's growing in here. We have so many things I can just go harvest and make actual meals, and we're actually replacing the grocery store, friends. It's so cool. So let's dive into this boom room too, because that may be why you're here. So I will put a link to their website. This is North Spore, and a link you can use and a code you can use for 10% off if you want to get into the mushroom business. Totally love North Spore. I've been buying stuff for them for a really long time, and this was just so exciting to me because this is like the towers in that it's contained. The things I got wrong when I was doing the bricks was trying to keep them, I was spraying them with my own spray bottle, and like I said, they were drying out and it just wasn't maximizing. This is pumping. Let me just see if I can show you guys. So this has, I don't know what you call all these parts. They have great videos. I'll link their video that explains all of this. But this is putting out a mist in here. You can see it's misty. So it's vaporizing water and pumping it out. It is on a humidity timer. So I have told it what I want the low to be, which is 90, and what I want my high to be, which is 98. This controller controls this fan because you need to pump out, I think, CO2. I don't know. You're pumping out something to help the mushrooms. Again, watch North Spore. They're the experts on all the details. This lid needs to be closed. It was leaking a little mist. And so this, we plug everything in here. I can tell it how high to go. I don't know if you guys can hear that. And how low. And so this is where I've had to just play with this system because you can control how much moisture and how fast this comes out as well. And originally I had it way too high, and this was spewing water out of it because I was pumping in way too much water. So I've had to, play with these 2 dials. And you'll have to do that. Spore sends a great guide on how to, like what each mushroom you're growing needs. And so I've just been playing with it based on the mushrooms, and I got it, and let's look inside. So the one thing I'm still working on, this is putting off a little water from the bottom. Now our garage is angled, so this thing is not even on the floor, and that's why it's leaking out here. It's in the garage, so it doesn't really matter, but they do sell a drip tray. It just was on back order. So I think I'm gonna go grab one on Amazon. And I originally, like I said, was pumping tons of water in this thing. So I really need to get in there and dry it out. I think I started with way too much water, and it's been kind of puddled in the bottom ever since. But they do have a drip tray. So inside here, it had 2 zippers, and I actually broke. Oh, there's spider. The spiders love this thing, by the way, in my garage. So I broke one of the zippers, which I'm kind of sad about because it'd make it easier to open, but that's all right. So in here, we have our mist going. It's nice and cool. These are my golden oysters, and they've just started to pop. And then down here, look at this. Incredible. I mean, that's just so cool. I'm gonna harvest these, and we're gonna have these for dinner tonight. We also have our lion's mane that's popping out here. These are small, these get way bigger than this. So I'm just kind of peeling back the plastic to allow them to spread and do their thing. I am not a mushroom expert in the sense of growing. So maybe you're not supposed to pull off the plastic. I don't know, but I did because they were looking like they were jammed up. And that's it. You just stick them in here. You fiddle with this thing, which is on wheels, which is really nice. And it makes it easy to fill. And you play with the fan. And we have so much food to eat tonight and probably for a few days. It's a lot of mushrooms, and that's just the beginning of them. And so these 3 mushrooms were on a subscription. It's called their Boom Box. I'll link it below, the name, but you can subscribe, and they have like easy, moderate, and hard, and you can tweak what you get in each one. And then they just come every month, so you don't have to worry about it. So you know you're gonna have your mushrooms. Or you can go in and buy your own logs. This is a lot of space. You could grow so many mushrooms here. I'm only using 2 shelves, and I already have that many mushrooms. So for me, I can totally handle 6, and it's what I'm working on now. After these, and a couple more bricks I'm gonna be adding. But I'm also drying. Like, I don't know if you guys have ever had mushroom coffee. Super expensive. Lion mane is a huge medicinal mushroom, usually found in those. So I'm trying to grow a lot of those mushrooms, dry them, make them powders, and then we're adding them to soups, we're adding them to coffee, we're adding them to smoothies. These are superfoods, they're adaptogens, they're just so healthy to add and so expensive to buy if you're buying that kind of stuff. That's why a large system like this makes sense to me. But they do have a tabletop version where you can just grow 1 brick at a time, which I think would be a great option too. So you could grow oyster 1 month and have oyster mushrooms all month, probably dry them and save them too. And if you want some recipes, make sure to follow my Instagram stories. I share a lot of that there. I share a lot of these recipes in my membership site that is launching soon on how to eat these things and make mushroom coffee and all of those things. And I send recipes out in my newsletter. So make sure to sign up for that. All the links for those are down below. But you can do a tabletop version and like do oyster 1 month and then maybe branch out and try shiitake. Shiitake is an amazing mushroom, a little bit harder to grow in these, but they give you all the instructions, and then you can do lion's mane. So the tabletop versions I think are also an incredible option, very affordable. This thing to me, I can, like, it's set up. I don't have to worry about this. I will be growing so many mushrooms indefinitely. Now, will parts break eventually? Probably. We live in America where things break, but still, it's not very expensive for the amount of food. If I were to get mushrooms out of this thing for a year and it died, it would still pay for itself probably 5 times over because mushrooms are so expensive, and I can get so much food out of this but I don't foresee it. I don't know what the warranties are on this, but I don't see it having any problems. It's a pretty simple system, just a fan and a humidifier essentially. So there's not a lot of moving parts, which is cool. Same as the towers. The towers are a cheap pump and a timer. Pretty simple things. My husband's an engineer and he always says like the less moving parts, the better. It's when you get into a lot of moving parts that you have problems. So these are simple. I highly recommend trying at least the tabletop version if you want to start growing some of your own mushrooms. They have amazing, North Spore has amazing videos. If you want more details on this, they explain it way better than I am. You guys know I don't really care much about details. I just want to grow a lot of food. So I whip these things together and we figure it out and it works. Thanks for joining me on this adventure of growing the most amount of food possible using simple, sustainable systems. I'll see you on the next one.